In 1991, Coca-Cola released a Diet Coke commercial with an impressive all-star cast. The ad featured Elton John and Louis Armstrong performing together in a nightclub to a crowd of patrons including Humphrey Bogart, James Cagney, and Groucho Marx. Obviously, one of the most impressive elements of this ad was that 4 of the aforementioned performers were long dead by the time of its release. The commercial was one of the first examples of digitally resurrecting deceased actors to sell products, a move that prompted Keith Lacroix, then executive director of the Artists' Rights Foundation, to publicly condemn the commercial, telling the LA Times, quote, "An Orwellian picture of what can happen is here, now," end quote. Despite Lacroix's fears, and in fact arguably justifying them, the deceased actor as pitchman trend would continue. Over the following years, Fred Astaire would dance with a Dirt Devil vacuum, Steve McQueen would launch a new model Ford Mustang, Bruce Lee would hawk Johnny Walker whiskey, and Audrey Hepburn would shill for both Gap and Galaxy chocolate. In most cases, these ads were made with the permission of the late actor's estate, and usually were created by splicing previously existing footage of the performer into new scenes and environments. But the more arguably insidious potential Lacroix had warned of was first made clearer to many viewers when, in 2007, director David Fincher tested CGI techniques he would require for his upcoming Curious Case of Benjamin Button by first resurrecting beloved popcorn icon Orville Redenbacher for a new commercial. This was fairly new territory at the time. It was not old footage of Redenbacher, but rather a fully digital version of the man, made by scanning a 3D clay model of his head and then digitally compositing it over an actor wearing a ski mask on set. While some considered the resultant ad cute fun, others were put off by it, referring to this digital version as Orville Dedenbacher. The ad created a flurry of debate regarding the potential usage of this technology, not just in ads, but in motion pictures. The use of digital means to incorporate footage of a deceased actor into a movie was not an entirely new idea in 2007, though typically it was associated with helping finish a film after an actor sadly passed during production, as was the case with Brandon Lee in 1994's The Crow, Oliver Reed in 2000's Gladiator, and later, Paul Walker in 2015's Fast 7. For the most part, audiences were largely willing to give a pass to this sort of thing, even in cases where the performer had not filmed anything for the movie but had planned to, as was the case when Disney and Lucasfilm used digital manipulation and previously shot outtakes from the 2 previous films to allow the late Carrie Fisher to finish her role as Leia in 2019's Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. But more eyebrows were raised when the technology was used to incorporate deceased performers into projects they never even knew of in their lifetime, such as when Laurence Olivier appeared in 2004's Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow, 13 years after his death. In 2019, producers of a Vietnam film titled Finding Jack announced that one of the leads of their film would be iconic actor James Dean. Apparently, they had first wanted to use Elvis Presley, but couldn't come to an agreement with his estate. Even though the film did have the go-ahead of Dean's estate, the announcement still caused a large public outcry, with many in the entertainment industry criticizing the idea and saying this was finally a step too far. To date, Finding Jack has never materialized, perhaps due to the controversy. But the willingness of Hollywood to use AI and CGI to make further money off of deceased performers is certainly still there. The concerns Keith Lacroix stated back in 1991 felt especially prescient during a months-long actors' strike earlier this year, where one of the large sticking points was the studio's desire to use AI to digitally recreate performers whenever they want. And even though those negotiations were largely about living actors, audiences only had to look back as far as a film released earlier that year for a reminder that, in an industry where money trumps everything, not even death can keep actors safe from ultimately appearing in more IP blockbusters. The year is 2023, and Warner Brothers are ready to ignore a lot of public controversy in order to launch the next big DC Comics superhero franchise with The Flash.
'Hello, listeners. You've heard of the DCEU. Well, get ready for Failure to Franchise presents the DCPU. Oh my God, open up a window. Jesus. Light a match.
Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris, feeling refueled and ready to go after a burrito, chocolate bar, and a baby in a microwave. So
I was going to say, don't forget to put that baby in the microwave.
Nope.
I hope everyone's ready for our fastest episode ever. Pun very intended.
Yeah. People definitely have to listen to this one at 2x speed, right?
Oh, that's a good idea. We should actually speak really fast and make people take it down to like one of the lower speeds just for it to be normal.
Yeah.
But no, Chris, we've survived. We've made it.
Mm-hmm.
We've survived the 3-month DCPU spectacular, a multi-decade look at failed DC Comics superhero adaptations, and we're bringing home now. Last episode we did Black Adam. And we said in that episode that, wow, we were just calling our shot on that one, and it was at that time was the most recent movie we'd ever done. But we not to rest on our laurels. Yeah. We're already trumping that here with the movie from this year. This is 2023's The Flash, and we are once again we're saying we're pretty sure, especially with everything going on with the DC EU and DCU that we'll talk about later. We're pretty sure this is not getting a sequel.
Yeah.
So we're calling our shot on this one. So Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about 2023's The Flash?
For sure. It is directed by Andy Muschietti, most famous for the movie Mama and the It films from a few years ago. This is written by a lot of people, written by Christina Hodson, who wrote Birds of Prey and Bumblebee. And then also two good movies, yes, correct. And then writing team John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein. They wrote Horrible Bosses, Spider-Man: Homecoming, Vacation, which is a Failure to Franchise alum. And then Joby Harold, who wrote the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, another Transformers movie, the recent one, Rise of the Beasts, and another Failure to Franchise alum, King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. And there was a rumor floating around. There was a certain script of a certain famous big tentpole superhero movie that was being submitted to the WGA this year that had 45 writers attached to it since the development stage. So most people are saying it was this one. So I just want to throw it out there.
Also, you mentioned with John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein, one movie you didn't mention, because we always talk about which movies they've done that maybe are Failure to Franchise alums. Mm-hmm. Well, they did Dungeons & Dragons, Honor Amongst Thieves or whatever from this year. And so, to be determined. We're waiting to see if we will be covering that one.
Correct.
I'm guessing we will, but we'll see. You know.
I have a sneaking suspicion. Yeah.
Yes.
The budget of this film, just like Black Adam, very conflicting, but it sounds like it crept up to $300 million. Domestically, it made $108 million, and worldwide, it made $270 million. So this is touted as one of the biggest box office bombs in cinema history, one of the biggest superhero bombs, losing WB upwards of $200 million. And in my interest of stats and numbers, you know how I like my stats, I did a little bit more digging, and I found this was funny that, this film was only in theaters for 73 days, okay? And on its final day of release, it made $189, okay? Mm-hmm. By comparison, listeners, I looked at Avatar 2, The Way of Water. That lasted 255 days in theaters, and on its final day, it made $741. So 4 times more. There was just a lot riding on this film, which we are going to get into it. The Flash.
That's weird, because I've heard that nobody saw Avatar 2 and has no cultural relevance. So that's weird.
It is true. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You know what? You're right. It was just us, right?
Yeah.
We just saw it multiple times.
Can you name a character in Avatar?
A Smurf. Papa Smurf.
The Wind Walker or whatever, right?
The whale movie.
No, you're right. Like, this movie had a lot riding on it. That's the thing, is like, obviously the financial aspect of this movie is, as you just said, embarrassing and a huge train wreck disaster. But what this movie cost WB and the DCEU even more is reputation. Like, this was a movie that was the final nail on the coffin of a multi-year. At this point, I feel like it's fair to just call it an experiment that never really took off. This is kind of the last gasp, a remnant of it. And there was one more movie after this that we might also cover that is kind of like in a bizarre middle ground of we don't quite know yet how exactly it fits into this new version of the DCU. Of course, we're talking about Blue Beetle, but the Flash will go down as essentially the end game, but not in a good Marvel way. the pitiful end game of the DCEU that started with Man of Steel. And yeah, this movie had if this movie had come out, it's interesting to talk about. Maybe we will talk about this at the end. It would have been interesting to see what would have happened if this movie had come out and been a huge hit. Because by the time this came out, the writing was already on the wall anyways. That was another thing about this movie we have to talk about. Is this is actually a very strange movie to talk about, as I'm sure we're going to get into in many ways. There's a lot of crazy behind-the-scenes stuff with this film, but also this was one that came out at a time where everyone knew it kind of meant nothing, essentially. So for a big superhero tentpole film to come out and, everyone's just like, oh, but it's already been announced that this means nothing. It's not going anywhere,
Announced to mean nothing, but also positioned to be one of the greatest superhero movies ever made. Yes. So it's like there's such a strange middle ground of like, okay, well, who is this for anymore? Is it for a very niche amount of the fandom that follows comic book movies and Hollywood in general, like super in depth, kind of like us, honestly? Or general audiences? And I think, well, I gave you guys the numbers, and it proves that it's served. When you try to serve all masters, you just can't sometimes. Like this kind of just fell on its face.
And in the way they're positioning it too, like we like to say often the phrase "have your cake and eat it too." And Warner Brothers and DC were selling this. We're trying both approaches of saying, oh, we're kind of rebooting DC after this, so this is like kind of an end of the previous version, but then also kind of they didn't want to quite say that it's not important because they wanted people to go see it. So there's also a little bit of like, well, this might be the movie that resets the timeline, so you do need to see this one, So it was actually very unclear when it even came out. How much does this matter? What is like the future coming off of this? We talked last time in the Black Adam episode about the Henry Cavill coming back as Superman for that film. That's even tied into this a little bit. So yeah, this was just a gigantic mess that by the time it hit theaters for that amazing 73-day run, nobody knew what to make of this and how to, even engage with it. And that was coming off of months, if not, over a year of just wondering, was it even going to come out at all, right? Are they going to shelve this? Are they going to have to entirely reshoot it with a different lead, which obviously we'll discuss, so just so much of this is the ultimate like nightmare scenario for a production, basically. Everything that could go wrong seems like it went wrong with this film.
Yeah, like they started to give away all of the surprises too, like in the marketing, like just right away, like before No Way Home came out, the Spider-Man sequel, and I'm sure at this point, many people have seen that movie. It was a gigantic hit and, had a huge audience and critical acclaim. But No Way Home came out and they kept their surprises very close to the vest, right? Like they didn't want to show everybody. They didn't want to tell everything. But then this movie, almost from like the first trailer, like the first teaser, they announced some big reveals, which always baffled me. Because we'll talk about the movie, but could you imagine sitting in this theater or sitting at, when we watched it and that character returns and you had no clue they were going to show up and how much of a different experience this may have been. So I just want to throw that out there.
Well, that just shows the difference between the confidence of the MCU and the panic and we don't know what's going on of the DCEU.
Totally.
Like where the MCU could not tell the audience. I think we all walked in. I walked in a No Way Home opening night fairly confident I was going to see Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, but I didn't know, So there was like, when they finally popped up on screen, it was the relief of like, oh, they did what they should have done, like that was exciting. And here, like you said, they gave away the big characters because that's to them the selling point. That's how they're going to get people in, because it's not enough to say it's a movie about the Flash and it has Wonder Woman and Batman. Like they already were like, we know you don't care, so we'll give you these other characters and hopefully that's what pulls you in. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know why we're dancing around some of these too. Let's just say, because the amazing thing is we're talking about, like, we're this far into the podcast, we're talking about this movie as just such a gigantic failure, everything going wrong with it, and we are talking about a movie that brought back Michael Keaton as Batman. The fact that you were saying anyway, so in 2023 there was a movie where Michael Keaton finally came back as Batman after decades away from the role, and it ended up losing WB $200 million, and it's one of the biggest bombs in superhero history. Well, how did this happen? Obviously, that's what we're going to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely shocking. Absolutely shocked. I remember, so I was, me and a friend of ours, we did a summer movie wager thing. So I was kind of betting on how well certain movies would do and this and that. And I put this one quite high purely because of the No Way Home effect. I was like, oh man, like people are going to come out in droves to see Michael Keaton. Like, holy shit.
Well, and
like,
I don't know about you, like, well, this is not, I can just, spoiler there, this is a film that I was never really that excited about, because by this point I was kind of checked out on the DCEU, and I was never that into Ezra Miller's casting as this character, and like their previous appearances in the franchise. But I will say, and I think you're in this boat as well, that day that was announced, that is where my intrigue and excitement started to get piqued a little bit, where I was like, holy shit, I'm going to get to see Michael Keaton again as Batman? That's awesome, you know. Yeah. And then you track that to by the time it comes out, I'm like, I'll just wait and watch it for the podcast.
I love that me and you do this all the time, right? Like there's so many movies, because Hollywood's just a complete dumpster fire a lot of the time, and there's so many movies, listeners, that me and Trev will maybe not even discuss firsthand, but we just know that, you know what, maybe I'm not going to check out Blue Beetle.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, this one it's shocking. It's absolutely shocking how this movie plays out. But first, before we get into a little bit of the backstory of the film proper, I want to ask you, because I always ask you before every main discussion of the DCPU, Trev, the Flash as a character, go.
Just another, like, you know, last time with Black Adam, you finally heard me say it's a character I didn't really have that much familiarity with.
Yeah.
The Flash is obviously a character I do have familiarity with because he is one of the big ones.
Sure.
You know, like the Flash is obviously a very iconic character, but was never a favor of mine. Now, what I will say, and this has come up a couple times before, and you brought up as both, you know, a black mark against me, and whatever, is at the exact same, like, in the exact same year, I believe, that Ezra Miller was cast for Batman v Superman, the CW also launched their Flash property. Grant Gustin was cast as the Flash on Arrow. And he, you know, shows up as a guest appearance, and then the very next year he gets his own spin-off show. So from the entire, like, and by the time this movie comes out, that TV show has wrapped. It's like done. So from the, like, it did like I think it was like 7 or 8 seasons. So in the entire time it took them to finally make the Ezra Miller Flash movie, we got an entire multi-season Flash show on the CW. But as we said, like, I actually did quite enjoy that show for its first, you know, initial seasons. I think, like, I really do like Grant Gustin's version of the Flash and his version of Barry Allen. Even as the show went wildly off the rails and became unwatchable in its last seasons, I would never put it on him. I think he was always fantastic in that role. So what I appreciate about The Flash mostly is like the early seasons of that show. I did watch the 90s show a little bit when I was a kid, but not enough that I really remember it. I just think I saw some episodes. Right. And then, yeah, he's obviously a character that would be in a lot of crossovers I read. But so, I mean, I think The Flash is cool, like everyone does. I think his powers are cool, but he was never a character I was super into. And like, you know, there's multiple versions in the comics. There's Barry Allen, there's Wally West, there's Jay Garrick. I'm not a Flash expert by any means. I can only tell you that I've probably read about the same amount of Wally West and Barry Allen, and even I don't know which one I like more. I just know more about Barry Allen because of the show.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's really my knowledge, too, is the show. I didn't watch it regularly, but an ex-girlfriend of mine loved that show. So I caught many an episode of
Well, can I ask you then,
Flash.
can I just quickly ask you, when you did pop in, what did you think of Grant Gustin in that role?
Oh, I really enjoyed the show.
Right, he was really likable, right? Like, he was just, his performance, he was just one of those guys who you just immediately like kind of fall for him. Like,
oh, absolutely, and he really sold the idea of Barry Allen being what is he? He's like a criminologist or something. Like, he's a little bit of he works in like a
forensic science. Yeah, he does
forensic
like
science,
crime scene analysis. Yeah,
but you buy him as a little bit of a genius, you know, and you know, kind of the best of us when it comes to that. And then you buy him as a young guy that. Just an honorable, fun-loving dude. Like, he has some layers in that show, and I quite liked it. I watched probably just like 20 episodes over the first like 3 seasons, I would say.
You're good.
yeah, that's what I've heard. But yeah, Grant Gustin was pretty great in the role. But that's it. That's all I know. I just know he runs real fast, and yeah. That's it.
He's cool. He's cool look, cool powers. Like, I get why he's iconic, but for me, I was just always more of a Superman, Batman guy, or Green Lantern.
Totally. So the film attempt at this. Okay, let's flash back even to Batman Begins, I guess, in around 2005, 2004. the WB is impressed with David S. Goyer, who wrote those films with Christopher Nolan. And they want him to write a Flash movie, and they're trying to get Ryan Reynolds. As we said in the Green Lantern episode we did, Hollywood was always trying to make Ryan Reynolds happen. And it took a while, but it did not happen with the Flash. Goyer leaves the project, and this project actually starts to merge as all of these other projects start to merge into like kind of like the George Miller Justice League movie, right?
Yeah, Justice League Mortal, yeah.
Yeah, and Adam Brody is supposed to be in the role at that point. I was a big Adam Brody fan when I watched I liked Adam Brody. I never really watched the OC until later in life. My friends I grew up at the perfect time of the OC. But I usually just watched it with my girlfriends. You know, I think that's what it comes down to. I think I just want to. I'm trying to hook up with my girlfriends. I think that's what's happening. So they get to choose what to watch. After that, it kind of goes on ice after everything falls apart. And in 2013, 2014, after Man of Steel, Warner Brothers announces this gigantic slate of films, and The Flash is set to come out in 2016 ahead of Justice League. They offer it to James Wan, who chooses Aquaman instead. And the reason he chooses Aquaman is because he's like, well, that Flash show's on still, just like what Trev said. So I'm kind of not into that right now. And Aquaman is something that's more interesting to him.
Yeah, and having seen Aquaman now, like whatever you think of that movie, I love it. But whatever you think of it, it's just so wild. You can see like what attracted Juan. Like Juan's wild sensibilities had more room to play in that universe, I think. Yeah.
We should say this is when they do cast Ezra Miller, by the way. So
yes.
Ezra Miller has been attached to this project since the beginning. Okay, they were hired for Batman versus Superman, right?
They make a brief appearance
they in there.
That.
They do. Okay.
Yeah.
So from the start, they're in line to play Flash. So we'll get to that soon. James Wan, they moved to Phil Lord and Chris Miller, which then they drop off the face of the map to go make Solo, a Star Wars story. Another
great career move for them. Yeah.
Another affiliate franchise alum. Seth Graham Smith takes over the script. Who wrote Vampire? What is it called? Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
Vampire Hunter. Don't worry, we'll get to you, Seth Graham Smith.
Oh my god. This movie just telegraphs our podcast, really. That's what's happening. He leaves. We try to get Rick Famuyiwa. I always say his name wrong, as the director. Yeah. He's very involved with the Disney Star Wars projects right now. Mm-hmm. So he's directed a lot of Mandalorian and I think Boba Fett and stuff like that. We move on from him. We go to Joby Harold, who writes the script. They're trying to get Robert Zemeckis to make this film. They're trying to get Mark Webb to make this film. Mm-hmm. Everything breaks down. Jordan Peele, yep. And then finally they go to John Francis Daley, Jonathan Goldstein to direct. They leave the project, and then Ezra Miller calls up Grant Morrison, famed comic book writer Grant Morrison, and says, let's write the script because I'm not happy with what I've been seeing for the last, at that point, that's 2019. So the last 6 years of scripts. Yeah. So yeah, they start writing the script together, and then Andy Muschietti finally takes the reins of the director chair, July 2019. And that is finally when the movie really starts coming together. And I know I flew through that really fast because we're on the Flash episode, but that is a lot of names over only a 6-year time, which is staggering. It's staggering.
And that was just the highlights. There was a lot more like names that were attached and dropped out. Like this is definitely a movie that, this is one of those ones where sometimes we talk about a movie that took a really long time to get to screen, and it pretty much stayed the same project throughout. Mm-hmm. This is one where we have to admit, like from the beginning of we talked about to what makes it to screen, there was probably actually just multiple versions of what this movie is even going to be.
Yeah.
I think it's even kind of late in the process they decide to have it be Flashpoint, based on, at that time, like, it was probably still like the most famous Flash comic story. But even like that, like a fairly recent comic story. But that's where they start to realize, that's the one that this movie should be, like, while the DCEU is kind of already, getting going. And so that's what they start, like, retooling into that. As you said, then Ezra Miller and Grant Morrison take their crack at it. I love Grant Morrison. They're one of the greats, obviously. I don't know if you've read a lot of Grant Morrison's work. It's all very heady, philosophical, outrageous, high-concept sci-fi stuff. Not surprising to me that probably multiple people looked at that script and were like, I don't know. I love Grant Morrison, but if I would, don't get me wrong, I would love to see a movie written by Grant Morrison.
Sure.
If I am a shareholder playing around with, $200-300 million of a studio's money, I don't know if Grant Morrison is the person I hire to write that movie, because they're going to make a very strange film that's not going to appeal to a lot of people. But I'll give Miller credit for, we talked about this last time with Dwayne Johnson, the actors who actually get kind of creatively involved and want to do right by the character. So the fact that Ezra Miller reached out to a very, successful, critically acclaimed comic book writer and said, let's try to take a crack at this together, that's interesting. But also I know that their thing was, apparently Ezra Miller wasn't happy that the movie was getting more lighthearted. And like that the scripts were starting to be more comedic, which you can bet was the Daily Goldstein effect.
Yeah.
And they wanted to make like a darker Flash film. And yeah, I'm going to have to disagree with Ezra Miller on that one. Like, the Flash shouldn't really be that dark of a film. There should be some levity and light to it. So.
Do you think Ezra Miller was so angry about the scripts, that's the reason they went on a crime spree?
No, I don't think that's why. It certainly couldn't have helped. The long gestation of this, the is it going to happen, the constant anxiety of how is it happening, whatever was going on with Ezra Miller during this time, and we're going to discuss a little bit of it, but they were clearly going through something. I'm not making excuses for them, but all I'm saying is whatever was going on with this project probably wasn't helping whatever mental health issues were clearly plaguing this person.
I'll never forget you sharing that TikTok or Instagram video into our group chat of them choke slamming some girl at like a Home Depot. And then nobody was like talking about it. Remember that? And we were always like baffled, like, wow, like this isn't like getting any play until it was revealed that was just the opening salvo. Yeah. Act one of this Greek tragedy.
Yes.
All of a sudden there's, I guess, again, all allegations, all allegedly, of course, but there was reports of kidnapping a family,
breaking and entering, assault, threatening to kill a family,
getting drunk at these clubs. And was it New Orleans where they were
like a menace that the entire city was afraid of.
Yeah. Like going into bars and just starting fights and getting thrown out, and then making weird FaceTime posts about rising up and beating the shit out of people, and especially
killing the KKK, which, okay, cool, but still an odd thing to do when you're the lead of a studio project.
Yeah, and it got really squirrely, and the WB, their hands are tied. They don't know what to do. They have a movie where Ezra Miller is in 98% of the shots of this film. Yeah. So like, how do you recast, right? That's what everybody was saying. We'll just recast them. And it's like, or recast them. And it's hard to do that. When you put in $300 million. So the weird part about this, Trev, though, is the writing is kind of on the wall with this film at this point in 2022, right? Last year. And then all of a sudden, a little movie is about to come out the following year, and it's called Batgirl. And Warner Brothers decides to completely delete it out of existence. And funnily enough, they're doing something very similar right now with this Wile E. Coyote Acme live action film. But it was such a strange time for WB and the Flash's production, because yes, Ezra Miller they have to hide them, from any interviews anywhere. the movie's been in complete disarray for 10 years. They're giving away all the plot points in the trailer. They're starting to panic. And then this other little movie, Batgirl, gets canceled. Mm-hmm. So the internet explodes, and they're wondering, why does this get canceled, but the Flash movie's still going ahead with it? Now, Trev, what's up with that, you know?
Well, I mean, the answers there's fairly obvious answers there. The Flash is a bigger property than Batgirl.
Sure.
You know, Ezra Miller had already been established as this character in Justice League. So, like, the Snyderverse fan base, who had maintained a vocal... what's the nice way to put this so we don't get doxxed? They were a very vocal, passionate fan base.
Yes.
That had like kept vocal enough that they actually succeeded in their long goal to get the Snyder cut released of Justice League. You know, so like the fans of this character and this actor as the character were there.
Yeah.
It's also more money was sunk into it than Batgirl. And also, like we said, there was the weird, like, maybe this movie could somehow like be the reset, you know, like maybe this one will work. So I don't it's not surprising to me that if you had to choose between the two, Batgirl's the one you would choose to shelve and this would be the one to get the release. I will say there definitely was a moment where I wondered if they would just shelve both of them. There was definitely a moment, I don't know about you, I don't know how serious I was about it, but there was definitely at least a brief moment where I thought we might never see this movie, where they just might take the loss on this too and be like, nah, never mind. Especially since we should say Batgirl was the other movie that had Michael Keaton's Batman in it. Mm-hmm, he signed on for 2, and that got shelved. So it was like, that was so bizarre because you were like, wow, you made an entire movie with Michael Keaton as Batman and you're never going to show the world it. That's when I started to think, well, maybe they're just like, if they just get rid of the Flash now, they just solve that problem, right? Like we never get to see him back, but they don't have to deal with it anymore. But yeah, no, I think they were just too invested and this had to come out. But as you said, that was a problem for them because they had a star that they couldn't have go out and promote it. They had to keep them, you know, entirely secret. They finally, you know, I don't know what it took, but they finally got them to release some kind of public statement about how they were battling, you know, mental issues, and that was kind of it, right? That was the only statement we got from Miller in the lead up to this movie coming out, and then no interviews, no red carpet.
No. There was a red carpet. They did wheel them out.
They were on the red carpet. I didn't know that.
Yeah. It was shocking to see it.
Probably rushed them down that reporter line very fast.
Yeah, exactly. Also, I want to mention. I don't know if people really know. Well, I guess why would they unless they were in the know? But Brendan Fraser was the villain of that Batgirl movie, by the way.
Yeah.
So right before he won that Oscar. So yeah, insane. You're getting a Michael Keaton return, two-hander. It sounds like he had a pretty big role in Batgirl, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was like her mentor. Yeah.
Yeah. And Brendan Fraser was going to be the villain, and that movie got completely deleted. So,
and it's strange now, like retrospect, because you just mentioned the like Wile E. Coyote the Acme movie, which they just it was announced they were going to do the same thing. They're going to shelve it for a tax write-off, and a couple filmmakers spoke up about it on Twitter and basically said, we got to see this before it came out, and it was amazing, and all the test screenings have gone really, really well, and that got people really, really angry, and people started being more passionate. And a couple days later, WB actually did reverse course a little bit, where they said now they're at least letting it shop around. Mm-hmm. So it does show that like public shaming can actually work to a degree, and like now in retrospect, it's almost like, I guess we didn't speak up enough about Batgirl, you know?
I heard people started to cancel meetings at WB in the last couple of days.
Yeah,
I heard about that too. And then I saw a post by Stephen Price, the composer. It's been a while since we had a score horror moment, by the way, but Stephen Price, the composer of this Wile E. Coyote movie, released this big recording session with a bunch of choir and all this other stuff. And WB took that video down, and then some crew members put like a supercut that was like 3 minutes long. I sent it to the group. I watched it. I did you get a chance to watch it?
No, I didn't get to see it before. No.
Well, it was cool. Like it showed all this practical effects. It showed all these like these sets and these explosions and just like behind the scenes of everybody just having a good time making a movie. And WB took it down. Mm-hmm. So it's we live in a weird time right now.
Yeah.
That movies can just be deleted from existence or shelved. Like, I mean, it's not a totally new thing because movies do get shelved. You know, like that another John Cena movie was shelved for like 5 years, wasn't it, with Jackie Chan?
Yeah.
So, I mean, movies do get shelved, but there's something about this new age studio system in the streaming world, and when everybody's losing money, where they can delete things for tax write-offs, and when that happens, they can't use it ever again. So
it's extra evil, and we've talked about this already. Like, it's not a matter of shelving it because it's the market's not right now, or we don't have the funds to get it out. Now they're shelving it just because they're anti-art. And they only see these things as product. And if they feel like they can make more money off a tax write-off, which, first of all, I read something where like the tax write-off they were expecting on this movie was $30 million or something like that. And I was just thinking, if you honestly don't think you're going to make at least $30 million off a Looney Tunes movie, like, what are you talking? Like, you know what I mean? Like, with John Cena in it was just so bizarre. This one was like really, really weird. But yeah, the lesson of the story is, out of all, we've talked a lot about how right now Hollywood is in complete disarray. Every studio is proving themselves to be fucking stupid. The stupidest studio in the world, by like, it's no argument, is Warner Brothers right now.
Yeah.
David Zaslav has turned that studio. I mean, it was already had problems before him, but he's only made it worse. This studio is a gigantic mess, and that's pretty appropriate for everything we just said about the lead up to this film as well.
And the crazy part too, we didn't even mention that James Gunn wrote the screen story to that film, the Wile E. Coyote movie, and he's running DC Films right now, currently. So he's running DC Films, which is under the umbrella of Warner Brothers. So his boss, David Zaslav, deletes his movie, and while he's still trying to get this other DC universe off the ground, while still pimping this one out to be this new restart, like, it's a complete fucking mess.
Well, I mean, remember, like, around the same time, remember when, Warner Brothers had one of the most popular name brand directors in the world, Christopher Nolan, completely brand loyal to them. And then they made their announcement that their upcoming slate of movies coming out of COVID were going to be released on streaming as well as theatrical, like, at the same time. And many filmmakers were like, that sucks. Nolan was like, I don't like that. Warner Brothers said, too bad. If you don't like that idea, you can go elsewhere. And what did Nolan do? He said he called their bluff, went to Universal, made Oppenheimer, which made almost $1 billion. So good call, WB. You severed your relationship with one of the most beloved directors in the world over the entirely short-sighted decision to also put things on streaming day of, which is already a trend that's like dying off. So yeah, I don't know.
It's a nutty world, man. Anyway.
Okay, so let's get back to The Flash.
Sure.
And let's talk about some of these. So we already mentioned, like, obviously the Ezra Miller of it all, so that became a headache for DC and Warner Brothers, obviously, to where, even like James Gunn, he found himself in the position of suddenly inheriting DC and promoting what DC was going to become after this, but having to promote this film, and I know we want to talk about that because I don't know if we believe what he said. But like how enthusiastic he was. But then, people would ask him about Ezra Miller, and he had to like you always have to walk around those questions. So, that's obviously an element we'll discuss when we get into the review. But Andy Muschietti, I want to ask, just in terms of him being so many directors that were in the play, Zemeckis, Robert Zemeckis, Matthew Vaughn, Jordan Peele, Goldstein and Daly themselves. But then we settle on Muschietti. What were your thoughts when they hired Muschietti? Do you remember, this was continuing a trend of getting horror directors to come in? They'd already done it with James Wan. They'd done it with David Sandberg, and now Muschietti. What was your confidence on Muschietti coming into this? Because I want to talk about the It Chapter 2 aspect.
Yes. Yes. I was at the time of his hiring. What did we say? What year was that? That was 2019. So if he was announced, maybe 3 months after It Chapter 1, I would have been like, rock on.
Yep.
But then It Chapter 2 came out, and that movie sucked donkey balls. That movie sucked. That was a bizarre second half to that story. And I remember being so excited for that second movie, and me and you discussing it, just being like, what the fuck happened? It felt like a different guy came in. It didn't feel like the same person made that movie that made the first movie. So by 2019, being hired for The Flash, I'm like, whatever. Like, I don't know if one thing, I don't care about The Flash, right? I'm not a big DCEU guy right now. And now this filmmaker that kind of screwed me over is announced as the director. I'm like, this movie has a very uphill battle for me personally.
Yeah, that's how I felt as well. Like, I know a lot of people say, like, oh, the second half of the It novel by Stephen King is worse. Yes, that's true, but it's not that bad where it should have gone off the rails that wildly as it did. It will always be just baffling to me, that dip in quality from the first to second, and like because it's a like that first one, it's not, was it still like the highest grossing R-rated horror film of all time or whatever? Like such a big cultural explosion. And then that second one was like so bad that it like almost erased like the legacy of the whole thing.
It did.
A certain degree, like people just don't really talk about the first one anymore either because we don't want to remember the second one.
The Halloween after that first movie, everybody was dressing up as Pennywise. I dressed up as what's the character with the raincoat in the boat? Like
Georgie.
I was Georgie for Halloween. Everybody was dressing up as characters, and then 2 came out, and then like you said, it just retroactively deleted it from our memories. Like I own the first, I own chapter 1. And am I going to watch chapter 1 again? I don't know. Like it's.
I mean, the good news is the first one does work as its own standalone movie. That is the one saving grace, is that you don't need part 2. Like the story of the kids at least is complete.
Sure,
but still, like it still is. It still sucks that the second one dings that to a certain degree.
Big time. Thoughts on Ezra Miller before we jump into the movie proper? Are you a fan of them? Like, were you leading up to? I'm not sure. I'm actually not sure about this question. So,
yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't really have an answer for that. I thought they were great, and We Need to Talk About Kevin. I think that's a really good movie.
Yeah.
But that's really it. Like, I didn't see most of their other stuff. Looking through it now, and like, I never saw The Perks of Being a Wallflower. I didn't see Trainwreck. So really, I guess I saw these stupid Fantastic Beasts movies. I didn't want to. I was dragged to them. But I don't remember them
for
making
the same
much
reasons I watched a lot of stuff with girlfriends. Is that
I don't remember them making much of an impact in those. So really, to me, Ezra Miller is the Flash. Like, oddly enough, even though honestly to me, Grant Gustin is the Flash, as I said. But when I think of Ezra Miller, I do think of the Flash, and I guess I'll say this going into this movie, and I famously have also never seen Justice League, either version of it. So I saw clips of them as the Flash, and I saw their really bizarre, nonsensical cameo in Batman v Superman that I don't think like ever was paid off, where it's like a future version of the Flash that pops in for a second.
Yeah.
But I just always found them really annoying in the part, like in this movie, like too manic and too like hyperactive and trying to do like a third-rate, like Robin Williams kind of thing. I don't know. It's just like I did. So the brief answer that I'm already rambling about is no. I did not like Ezra Miller as a Flash going into this, and I was always kind of in the camp of kind of hoping they would be replaced. I know it's like a shitty thing to say, maybe, but not because of even before all the problems. I just didn't like them as the character very much.
Sure.
So
sure. Yeah. I'm similar. We Need to Talk About Kevin is a great movie, and I think works to their strengths. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, and I don't know what their like problems really are, and like obviously we hope anybody gets the help they need. So maybe they have turned things around or are turning things around, and maybe they will still have an amazing career. But this will always be an interesting, part of that career, But hey, Robert Downey Jr. shows you can overcome this stuff. So I'm pulling for anybody, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, you want to get into it?
Let's do it.
Tell me something. You can go anywhere. Another timeline. Another universe. So why do you want to stay and fight to save this one?
Because this is the world where my mom lives. I'm not gonna lose her again. Time has a pattern that it can't help reliving. Different people, different worlds, drawn to each other like magnets. It's my face. You stole my face.
If you were to go into the past, you have no idea what the consequences can be. Bruce,
I could fix things.
you could also destroy everything.
This can't be happening. I completely broke the universe.
Zod, we've been waiting for you.
I created a world with no metahumans. And now there's no one to defend us.
Want some help?
Oh. You are?
Yeah. I'm Batman.
If I can't undo what I did, if I can't get back, there might not be a future. What's the play? Batman, what do we do?
We try not to die.
It's not Clark.
My name is Kara.
I'm Barry. We're Barry.
Barry, what are you doing?
Our kids are gonna want to see this.
Barry Allen, now well known as the Flash, continues to juggle between civilian life and his superhero duties. However, when Barry discovers that he can use his powers to travel back in time, he decides to do it again, but with a mission to save his mother from being murdered. In doing so, Barry creates a whole new timeline where metahumans are non-existent. This made even worse when an alternate General Zod invades Earth. With the help of his younger past self, an alternate and elderly Batman, and an unfamiliar Kryptonian, Barry must stop Zod's evil plan and hopefully travel back through the space-time continuum in order to restore his universe back to the way it was.
It's almost like he has to go back to the future. I'm actually impressed with how good and succinct that plot synopsis was at this moment.
Thank you.
Chris. So,
Thank you.
So why don't you now tell us how you felt about the film itself?
Okay. Let's read James Gunn. Mm-hmm. James Gunn, a person we love.
Yes.
I'm going to give him some shit right now, okay? And I think I've given him shit in the past for being a bit of a company man, corporate stooge, even though, respectfully, the guy is awesome at what he does, okay? Mm-hmm. He is awesome, and I love his films, and I like going back to the days of Super and Slither. Like, I really do love the guy. He very much appeals to me. But, like I said, corporate stooge. Every single movie he's involved in, he touts it as, like, the best experience he's ever had, and yada yada. Best cast, the best movie. Oh my God, it's going to be the greatest. And he came out saying that this film, The Flash, is among the greatest superhero movies of all time. Of all time, Trev. Mm-hmm. Now, I will respectfully disagree with Mr. Gunn. I find this movie, The Flash, embarrassing in a lot of ways. I felt like I was thrown into the middle of an episode of TV in the first little bit, but with a $300 million budget behind it. Ezra hasn't earned the level of audience awareness as this character, nor has the character even. I think, Grant Gustin's The Flash show is what people think about, and that kind of has a place in pop culture, but not really to general audiences. I still don't find that. This movie feels almost alienating in the sense of, like, fans versus general audiences, and that's why, like, again, it just was, it serves nobody. And I found this movie just a nostalgia drip of junk constantly. It's not like a touch. Oh man, I'm trying to find the words because I don't think it's like a total piece of shit until it is a piece of shit. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sounding super negative right now, but that's because that's where it gets to. It gets to just a steaming pile. When it's fine, but then it just, oh man, it goes to such lows. There's two Barrys in this movie that Ezra plays, an older one and then a younger self, and both of them so annoying. The first Barry, our main Barry, Barry 1, I'm going to call, I guess, well, can I call him Barry 1? Doesn't matter. You know what? Yeah, I'll do that. Barry 1, he's manic, panicked, whiny, neurotic, and uncomfortable. He makes you feel anxious while you're watching because he's very fidgety and his eyes are darting side to side. He comes off as like a lunatic. And then Barry 2, his younger self, which is fair enough, he is younger, is just annoying and obnoxious.
Well, let's face it, I am pretty obnoxious.
And I'm sorry, but I do have a recollection of Grant Gustin's character, or Grant Gustin's portrayal of the character, and that's unavoidable. He has so much charisma, while I think Ezra Miller's portrayal of the character is just, it's so irritating.
How old are you, like 40?
Okay, you don't stop talking. It's not charming. It's abrasive and exhausting, and oh my God, I am starting to realize what people mean.
And for 2.5 hours, when this character's on screen for almost every single scene, it becomes really grating.
Where's my socks?
And we'll talk about Michael Keaton too, but he should be embarrassed to come back for this. Anyways, you go now.
You mentioned what James Gunn said about it. We should also talk about another buddy of ours, Tom Cruise, our beloved Tom Cruise, who was shown an early cut of, or like an early screener of this, and said it's like the movie Hollywood needs right now. You know, just love it. And then James Gunn says it's the best superhero movie of all time. And then it comes out, and the reviews are actually kind of positive, right? Remember that? Like it's it wasn't like, you know, it came out and it was for a DCU, and especially for the train wreck everyone expected it to be. It came out and it was like, people were like, you know, actually, yeah, it's all right. So then I sit down to watch it, and Chris, I kind of get what they mean. So here's the thing. I'm definitely more positive than you are.
Sure.
But let me throw this caveat in. We don't watch these movies in a vacuum. So I'm watching this movie, and I'm also comparing it to Black Adam.
Yes.
I'm comparing it to the rest of the DCPU movies we've watched. And I'm also going in with all the baggage we just discussed. And for a while, I'm watching this, and I'm going, okay, I get why people like this. I actually do think this movie has like a lot of fun energy to it, especially the first half.
Yep.
So I'm actually like slightly more positive even about Ezra Miller in this. So maybe that'll be a point of contention for us. Like I actually kind of liked them in this, like to a certain degree. So I'm watching them and I'm thinking, this isn't bad. And then you said something, though, where you said it's not really a piece of shit until it is. And that's the thing, like this movie is a really hard one for me to discuss because I think this movie has a lot of everything that's good and a lot of what's terrible about modern superhero movies. And this is a movie that I can get into it for very long stretches of time. Like I said, I really just like the first half of this film. But the problem is, every time it becomes an action movie, suddenly it is embarrassing. This movie has some of the ugliest CGI and action sequences ever put to film. It's just flat out embarrassing and cringeworthy every time it goes to these horrible video game cutscene CGI representations of the characters, as if like the movie almost thinks like we don't know what like Michael Shannon looks like, you know, like to where suddenly we're seeing like this bad CGI double and we're like, oh yeah, I know that's not a human being, you know. And like that's the real shame of it for me, because I actually do think this movie has a fun story and is telling a good Flash story. And like you said Michael Keaton should be embarrassed to be in this. I get what you mean that he should be embarrassed that he came back to be in this movie, but I don't think he needs to be embarrassed. I actually really liked Keaton in this. I did find it fun to see him again. There's things about Sasha Calle's Supergirl I liked. So this is like a hard one for me because I didn't hate it. I like this. I think I'm grading it on a curve. You know, I think I'm going into it thinking it's going to be one of the biggest pieces of shit I've ever seen. And I'm going, oh, okay. I think the reason people kind of like this is because they're like me, where they're like, oh my God, I'm fearing the worst. And then, oh, it's actually kind of fun. Oh, this is kind of fun. Oh, this is bad. This is bad. Oh, it's kind of fun again now. And it ping pongs back so much that I ultimately can't give it like a really high recommendation, but I didn't hate it. So I don't know. I'm looking forward to talking to you about it and talking about the highs and the lows, but I don't know. It's like, this is honestly one of the most confusing movies we've ever watched for me because I think a lot of it is good and a lot of it is bad. And I don't know yet. I don't know which way I'm tipping yet. So I'll leave it to you to try and get me to that final verdict.
So I think I'm going to go back to my fans versus general audience thing, right? And I think I'm not saying that the nostalgia is getting to you. That's not what I'm getting
Well,
at.
and to be fair, you're definitely don't say that because a lot of what I don't like is the nostalgia plays, and we'll obviously get to that. So,
Exactly.
Yes.
But I felt like the pinpointed fan details and the if you know stuff just feels like maybe that appeals to. I don't know if it appeals to you more than it does to me. I'm not sure because you know this world so much compared to me. But I just found the technical prowess of the movie really is so bad. Like we can't understate it or overstate it. Like it is. Yeah, it is.
We can't overstate how bad it is. Yeah,
it is horrendous. This movie is 99% animated, but the worst animation you've seen in CGI
and you know, I was thinking
films.
like they're like the big climax at the end, right, or the big action climax where it's the two Flashes, Batman and Supergirl fighting Zod's army in the desert. The action like choreography of that, I actually had this thought while I was watching it. The action choreography is good enough that if that choreography was just an animated movie, I'd go, this is awesome.
Yep.
But because it's a bad animation in a live action movie, it's suddenly atrocious. Isn't that weird? Like, because like the way the scenes are staged are cool, but you're like, why does it look like this suddenly?
I agree. Yeah. The uncanny valley effect is like it's just in full force. Everybody's head is floating independent of their body constantly. And you know, like even when the two Barrys are on screen together, they did a lot of digital replacement, and it's pretty telling when they're on screen together. Sometimes it looks amazing. But then, when it looks like a piece of shit, it really looks like a piece of shit.
Yeah,
and it's
there's no
so
consistency.
There's no consistency. And, you know, right off the top, we can't blame VFX artists. We all know what's going on in the industry right now. They're all overworked and underpaid, and it's an absolute cluster when it comes to that. But I have to blame somebody, so I'm just going to blame the movie. You know, like the movie, you failed me, you know? It just is so ugly. It opens up with this baby shower, like babies falling out of a skyscraper as it's crumbling, and it's embarrassing. It looks like I watched a YouTube reaction video to it, and they called the babies looked like they were out of that Son of the Mask movie, which I can't disagree. In 2023, that is you can't have that anymore. I'm sorry, you can't have that anymore. But I just found, like Ezra is just kind of annoying to me. I think that's my biggest. If you can't get over that, it's a very tough pill to swallow.
I would agree. I think that was my biggest surprise of the film is that I didn't find them annoying. Is that I kind of liked them. No, I did like Barry 2 is annoying, but I also think Barry 2 is supposed to be annoying. But I thought some of the interplay between them was funny. I thought the scene where Iris West comes to Barry's apartment for the first time, like I actually found them kind of charming and funny in a like goofy rom-com way in that. Like I really like the moment where Barry like phases through the wall to get some beers because his fridge is just completely empty. And when he comes back in, he's just like, yep, got some beers. I just keep them in my fridge. Like a thing nobody would say, you know, like I thought like that stuff is actually, you know, he says, oh no, I'm a very tidy person. And suddenly the cupboard breaks open. All the stuff he just cleaned up in 2 seconds pops out. Like I like that stuff. So I went into this sure I was going to hate Ezra Miller's performance, and I came out like, okay, I that was fine. I thought they were fine. Like, yeah. But I was going to say this about the movie and like my conflicted nature on it. At the beginning, you talked about this movie probably had like 40 writers. But even in like the writers you listed, right? So you said Christina Hodson, who wrote Bumblebee and Birds of Prey, 2 movies I like a lot. And then you have John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein. We'll remove Vacation out of the equation, and we'll concentrate on Horrible Bosses, Homecoming, and Dungeons & Dragons. Movies I like, right? And then you have Joe B. Harold, who wrote Rise of the Beasts, and Obi-Wan, and King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. And I watch this movie and I go, oh, I can tell what parts are Christina Hodson and which parts are Joe B. Harold. You know what I mean? Like, this is a movie where the highs and lows are, like, very apparent, and it's a movie that's constantly battling itself. And, yeah, the problem is a lot of it relies on the action, and you said you have to blame the movie. The movie does make a very strategic mistake in that it sets most of the action in the daylight.
Yes.
And that is, you can hide bad CGI with rain and darkness. People have been doing it for years. And this, I mean, the moment where they first find Supergirl and she comes out of her prison and fights like the Russian guards in slow motion, my soul left my body out of like embarrassment.
Dude, the amount of digi doubles in this movie, the most you've ever seen ever in movies before. So painfully, obviously, rubber, soulless, the movements that make no sense. It looks just so terrible. And it's cool to see Supergirl. We did a Supergirl episode in the DCPU series, and it's cool to see a new version of Supergirl.
Yeah, and I like this version of her, but
she says 6 lines, but yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And she's like all just angry and violent, and almost sort of just reminds you of all the things you don't like about Man of Steel. I don't look.
But she has a reason, right? Like that's what I like.
Fair.
Like,
that's fair. She is held captive for presumably years. So okay, I'll give you that. But other than that, she kind of has zero personality. But I like the look of her for sure. I think she looks great. I would have liked to see more of her, but probably not going to happen. And then, Michael Keaton shows up halfway through the movie in like the most embarrassing fake wig and beard. And they do a really, really bad job at hiding Michael Keaton's smaller stature. Did you notice this? Mm-hmm. Michael Keaton is not a tall man. And that's coming from a man that is not tall myself. Okay? But he's not a tall man. And they don't try to hide it. So Batman is never intimidating. Doesn't look good in the action at all, in my opinion. He's completely CGI for most of it, and he looks like he's 5'5", and it just doesn't work. Like, and he's. I know you're saying you like Michael Keaton in this, or you thought he was good. I thought he was totally phoning it in.
You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts.
That's how I felt.
It's weird. It's hard to say because I feel like Michael Keaton phoning it in could probably will still be more just naturally charismatic than a lot of the other performers in this movie. You know what I mean? So it's like
I did like Ben Affleck a lot though. When Ben Affleck's in the beginning, maybe not during the CGI action, but when he's talking to Barry outside of his car.
These scars we have make us who we are. We're not meant to go back and fix them. And there's nothing broken with you that needs to be fixed. Take it from an old guy who's made a lot of mistakes. Do you want to live your past? Live your life. Don't let your tragedy define you.
What if it's supposed to define me? Your tragedy made you a hero.
That also made me alone.
That was like one of the best Ben Affleck Batman performances I've seen of him, right?
I never really had too much of. Ben Affleck's like not my Batman. I've never had too much of a problem with him. I do think. There's something about when he's in the suit, and particularly in this one. Why does he suddenly look so ugly? Like, you know what I mean? Like the face, just like the bottom of his chin and everything. Like the way that suit presses it together. I also hate the suit he's wearing in this. Like it's like overly designed.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah,
it's bad.
But like, there's just something that happens to his face in that suit where it just like he looks like Marv from Sin City or something instead of Ben Affleck. It's really weird.
Yeah,
it's also like him even being in this, right? Like the decision to do. We talk about like these movies, obviously, like we said, these don't exist in a vacuum, and you can always tell what they're trying to ape. This idea of just even having Batman be like Barry's mentor, it's such an obvious like ripoff of Spider-Man and Tony in the MCU.
Totally,
like that's the only reason it exists. Because like this story could work just fine without Batman. Could definitely work fine without Wonder Woman's entirely pointless cameo. But like, there's no reason.
First of all, Gal Gadot had a summer of cameos. Okay,
yeah.
Number one. And I also found it hilarious that every single time she does show up as Wonder Woman anymore is the stinger, like that the musical sting happens for like 3 seconds every single time. Now it's just parody, in my opinion. I do like you mentioning that they're aping the MCU because they're also aping the significance of Man of Steel. Okay, what I mean by that is they are making Zod's invasion the same as the Battle of New York in the MCU. They're making a through line through that. The only difference is people liked the Avengers. And it kind of made sense to make the Battle of New York be this huge crux of the MCU that, even what's her name, Kate Bishop was around in New York when she saw that, and it kind of inspired her to be a hero, stuff like that, seeing Hawkeye, right? But making this moment in the DCU where a large percentage of the people hate that movie. And I know the Snyder Bros like that movie, but you're not the majority of those people.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely right, because, like, look, as someone who does not like Man of Steel, I'll fully acknowledge that Michael Shannon's Zod is one of the best parts of it.
For sure.
Having said that, that character is not iconic enough or important enough or memorable enough to say, like, aren't you excited that he's back? And especially when you're like, aren't you excited he's back? He has 8 lines now, and he just shows up and is just a menace. It's like, well, okay, if you want to make me excited that Michael Shannon is back, do what Man of Steel did and let Michael Shannon be Michael Shannon and have some, like, cool monologues and have some decent scenes. But the fact that they even bothered to get Michael Shannon back for this, I love Michael Shannon because he's never pretended to care about being in these. Like, he's very open about how he just does it for the money, and even he doesn't know what they're about or gives a shit about, like, the end results of them. But I'm kind of shocked he would bother to come back for this, because they give him nothing to do.
No.
And most of the time he's CGI, and then when he's not, he's just kind of repeating lines of dialogue that he would have said in Man of Steel. It's just completely pointless. They would have been better off creating a new villain for this, if they really couldn't find, like, an iconic villain that actually matters from the previous movies. Like, the Zod thing is definitely a whiff here.
You're right. And I think all the main threats of the film are kind of a whiff. You know, like, I understand the idea, you know, Flash wants to go back in time and save his mom from being murdered. And I think it sucks that I've seen that movie a few times now. You know?
Well, and if you're a Flash fan, you've also seen the Flash. Oh, not to keep bringing it up, but the Flash TV show had already done Flashpoint by this point.
Yeah.
I think it was season 3 did Flashpoint. Same story. Goes back in time to stop the death of his mother, creates an alternate timeline, screws everything up. Like, same story, because that is a famous Flash story. So they got to it. So you're giving us that story already, or like that we've already seen. So you better come up with, like, a great version of it and not just kind of redo it, you know?
Totally. Like, yeah, you're so right. It's already been done before in the context of this character.
Yes.
And then we gotta talk about this multiversal epidemic that is happening in comic book cinema right now. And I think this, for me personally, this is now just something that I'm exhausted by. I don't care anymore. When these movies, and I understand there's a thing in the comics, and I understand the events, and I get it, but I wasn't really big into the comics either for that sort of stuff. Like, this multiversal stuff to me is just becoming excuses for cameos. It's overdone, and it's like a panic button to me. Like, it's like, oh, we don't know what else to do. Let's reset it. Let's get the actors back. We'll see what happens. But there's not really a good story to tell. You know, I loved No Way Home. You know, now I'm going to go back on what I just said, but I loved No Way Home, but I felt that did it in an interesting character way and actually completed arcs in that movie. You know, arguably the best character in that film is Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. And it felt like it retroactively fixed stuff that may have been screwy in all of those movies. While this one, it's just an excuse. It's a device to fill your gullet with popcorn and clap. This is a movie to clap at. And it just didn't do it for me, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'll disagree with you only in that because I have a different complaint about the multiverse thing here.
Sure.
So I agree with you in general that the multiverse aspect doesn't work in this, but here's what the actual problem is. This is, if any, like No Way Home, if any movie should have the impetus and should be able to get away with being a multiverse story, it is Flashpoint. That is a multiverse story. The idea of, like, you go back in time and you accidentally create an alternate reality. You know, You could say Back to the Future 2, which is, like, they reference the Back to the Future movies in this. I actually thought that was also very clever, the whole, like, Eric Stoltz thing as the first indication that he's in a new universe. in this universe, Eric Stoltz did play Marty McFly. I liked that. But, you know, you could argue Back to the Future 2 is a multiverse movie, right? Because it's the same idea. The problem here is that, just like Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, this is a movie that does not take advantage of the multiverse. Except when it gets to the end, it's like suddenly like, here's all the multiverse shit in like 1 5-second sequence, which I know we're going to talk about. We are definitely going to talk about that sequence. But up until that point, it's just Michael Keaton, right? And like, oh, there's Supergirls in this universe, not Superman. But otherwise, it's not taking advantage of how much you can and how much previous versions of Flashpoint have. So, for instance, like in the actual Flashpoint comic, I don't know if you saw this in your research, Chris, but in the universe that Flashpoint creates, the Waynes were never killed.
Right.
But there's still a Batman. It's Thomas Wayne. And the Joker is Martha Wayne. She's gone insane, and she's the Joker. And it's like, oh, this is fascinating. And they could have done that in this. But like you said, they want to have it all be... The only thing they want to do is bring back Michael Keaton.
We get Michael Keaton Batman. When I read that, I was just knocked out.
As soon as I read that Michael Keaton was in, the whole idea of this multiverse, and wow, it was just shocking.
That was the clincher. When you turn the page and you realize who it is, you think, oh, that's great.
It's like bringing back a classic. It's like bringing back the Beatles. Many people probably think that they won't see that again in their lifetimes, and they have to content themselves with rewatching the old movies, Batman and Batman Returns. That's why it's so exciting, I think, for people that were affected by the first Batman to see that Batman is coming back again. For me, it was very exciting. The idea of bringing back Michael Keaton as Batman, obviously because I saw Batman in the movies when I was a teenager.
To be honest, the fact that we'd be able to bring Michael Keaton back as the Tim Burton Batman was one of the things that cemented our decision to make The Flash.
Mm-hmm. They don't really want to play with the universe in a way that's interesting or create new characters. They just want to show you characters from the past. So that's why when we get to the moment of the Cameo Fest, it's like, oh, look, here's characters from other properties. But you could have, if you actually had a really established DCEU that had been working, and if you had balls, and if you knew what you were doing, you would have actually taken advantage of the multiverse in this in a larger way. Mm-hmm. So that's the bigger problem with it. That's why, to me, I do think the movie's working whenever it's just concentrating on Barry and the drama of losing his mom and trying to make up for that. I actually do find this is where I think Miller is at their best. Any scenes that are about them dealing with the grief of losing their mother.
Yeah.
The sequence where Barry does finally go back in time again to try and put things right and has that kind of goodbye conversation with his mom. Really good scene. Really
that was
touching.
Great. I wrote that down. I really liked the simplicity of it, and I really it did work for me emotionally. Definitely.
Yeah. Definitely. So anytime the movie's just about Barry and this thing, it works, and then anytime it kind of starts veering off into multiverse shenanigans a little too much, and especially when it gets to action, then it starts to get messy and sloppy and bad. Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, it doesn't. Its heart's in the right place, but it's almost like it doesn't recognize what the beating heart of this movie is, and it bypasses it to just go for easy merchandise and nostalgia and clapping, like you said.
Well, even so much as Barry's room is filled with WB property, right? It's just a bunch of posters.
I love that. Whenever somebody have you ever met anyone in your life who has? I mean, I had a bunch of movie posters on my walls growing up, but I was never studio loyal. This person only likes Warner Brothers properties for some reason.
I wonder if this thought crossed your mind, because it did cross my mind. Okay, and ever since we saw It Chapter 2, and there is some wild tonal swings in that movie, right? Mm-hmm. They don't work in that movie. I felt like Andy Muschietti did that with this movie as well.
Oh, yeah.
A bunch of times, and it was very off-putting. But the moment I did really, really notice it, and then I'm gonna make a through line here to a little movie we both love, Gremlins 2, The New Batch. Mm-hmm. Okay, there's a moment when we're in Barry's room or whatever, and he's talking to his roommates, and they have a Looney Tunes desktop screensaver or something, right? And then Barry 2 now has powers, and Barry 2 goes on this wild ride of trying his powers out and screwing up and blowing stuff up and going. It just gets so chaotic. I'm going to ask you, do you think that was an intentional cartoony moment? Do you think the tonal swing was to be hey, we're actually making a live action cartoon right now? Do you feel like that was maybe done poorly, but maybe that's the reason why we get the swings like the baby shower or the horrible end battle in the desert, and what you said, some stuff looks, maybe it would look great if it was animated.
Yeah.
Did you get that feeling ever?
Yeah, I do. Here's the thing. I think you're absolutely right that it's trying to be cartoony at times. I think Muschietti, and I don't know if it's he's an international director. I don't know if it's a translation thing or whatever. I don't think Muschietti has a great handle on humor.
No.
I don't think humor is Muschietti's strength, and obviously this movie is a movie that's trying to be funny. And I do think, like I said, I think there actually are a lot of funny moments, but I think a lot of them probably come from the script or just Miller's kind of more comedic performance in general. A moment that did make me laugh, and I'm not going to lie, I just thought it was very funny, was when the first Barry doesn't realize he's lost his powers yet, and he like gears up to do the flash run, and then he just kind of runs around that circle on the squeaky floor. I thought that was funny, you know. But
may I say, I like that scene too. But remember when I mentioned that I felt like I was being thrown into a TV episode? Didn't you feel like the moment when he's running around and then it cuts and he looks at the camera and he's like, "I'm slow." Didn't you feel like that would have been cut to commercial break?
Yeah. I watched this on HBO Max with commercials, and I wish they'd cut to commercial there because they threw them into the most random middle of a scene moments instead. Streamers,
Oh, no.
You know what? I'm putting this out there. If any streamer wants to hire me as the guy who watches all of their TV shows and movies and decides when to put commercial breaks in, I will do that part. But no, so I thought that scene was funny. But you mentioned the scene where Barry 2 gets his speed for the first time and goes off. That's a great moment of what I mean about how Machete doesn't necessarily get humor, because that should have committed even harder to being like a Looney Tunes cartoon.
Yes.
Throw in Looney Tunes sound effects, have like crazy visual gags there. Like just go completely over the top because you've already made, like you said, you've referenced Looney Tunes already, so you've kind of set it up. You might as well commit. Did you notice the really weird cameo in that part, by the way?
I did. Nikolai Coster-Waldau, right?
Yeah, for some reason, he's the guy who has a slice of pizza that he steals.
So weird.
For some reason, I know. Well, I mean, he worked with him in Mama, so I guess, but he is he's credited not even as Nicholas Coster-Waldau. He's credited as Lucas Desange for some reason.
Oh, weird.
I don't know if that's like a joke or whatever, but yeah, it's just a bizarre cameo. But yeah, so I think Muschietti is not a comedy director for sure, and like I think this movie is often very, very funny, but kind of almost like in spite of itself.
I really liked I'll say something nice. The joke I liked the most was when the lasso of truth is on Batman. Yeah. And he starts like spouting off to himself. He's like, "Oh, I should have used my money to end poverty, and I'm overcompensating for my childhood trauma." And he's like trying to rip off the lasso of truth.
And you are welcome.
My ego's far too big to say thank you to someone else. I developed this all-powerful persona to compensate for my childhood trauma.
I too have childhood trauma.
The lasso of truth never gets old.
I would do a lot better just give me all that money. If I really want to end crime, I should end poverty.
Well, I know sex exists. I've just never experienced it.
I thought that was very, very good. Now, is that Andy Muschietti? No, that's Ben Affleck doing a good performance, right? So...
yeah, even like a little moment that makes me laugh later on. I don't know if this made you laugh, but it's because I know what it's kind of making fun of, because we all know the infamous stories about how like hard it was for Michael Keaton to move around his Batman suit. And when Barry 2 makes his Flash suit out of the Batman suit, and there's that great just single shot where he turns to Barry 1 in the ship, and the suit doesn't turn with his face. That made me laugh, and I'm sure that's just something they noticed on set, and we're like, oh, okay, let's do it. So I'm not going to really give Muschietti a lot of credit for that either, but that was a good laugh too.
Yeah, no, that was good. There's a couple of visual gags, even like the cut of him cutting off the ears of the of the thing. That was really funny. Yeah. I did like that. So again, sometimes it's fine. Like I know I sound way more negative than you. I know I do, listeners, and I know.
No, and I'm not even disputing your taking it that way. I'm saying like. Maybe I was just comparing it to Black Adam, and this is definitely more fun than Black Adam. You know what I mean? Like it's a better time than that.
I would agree.
Yeah. Like this has energy to it,
Yes, yes. There's more of a take.
And the story is actually propulsive. Like, it does move fast, it gets to where it's going quickly.
And even the Speed Force looks like shit, but at least there's style to it. Like I'll say that to the Speed Force and Barry
they came
going
up with
into
an
the
interesting
multiverse.
visual idea. They couldn't execute it.
Nope, not even a little bit, Trev. Okay. I do want to talk about some of my bigger issues with the movie, other than just wham bam and bad CGI and annoying character stuff. Like an actual thing on a thematic level that did rub me the wrong way.
Okay. I
found this movie insane to bring back Michael Keaton as Batman, that we all remember. Because it's like the same mansion, it's the same cars, it's the same, his Batwing, all the same stuff, right? And we introduce this brand new Supergirl, okay? Only to fucking kill them multiple times. And then to say to us that, yes, we are absolutely allowing this universe to die. And I was just like, oh, I mean, I get the message of this movie about like dealing with your grief, and some things are just inevitable and you can't change the past, and things do affect you at a young age and do, you know, make you into who you are, right? Like, I totally get the themes there. But to just let that universe die and take these iconic characters and your reintroduction of a Supergirl and just to fucking just kill them off, just sat so strange to me, and really felt the nostalgia play at that point. That I was like, oh, you did just bring Michael Keaton back because of the poster and to get butts in seats. There's no reason for him to be in this movie. There's no reason why that shouldn't be Ben Affleck.
Well, okay, but here's my argument to that, right? So first of all, I will say Michael Keaton gets to do a heroic death scene, which every actor wants to do, right? So he gets that, at least, where, you know, you already brought me back, Barry, you know? So right. Everybody wants to do that. But I will disagree with you only because you're only right in, like, the version of the movie we got. But what we have to remember is what you're talking about is going back to our discussion about what a fucking mess this movie was after the fact and post-production. Because this movie was supposed to be used to set up Michael Keaton being the new Batman moving forward into this universe. And the original ending of this movie was Michael Keaton and Sasha Calle as Supergirl showing back up at the end.
Sure.
And meeting up with him on the steps of the courthouse. So this movie was originally supposed to end with him actually alive. He's changed the universe to where they have survived. So yeah, you're right that like the version of the movie we got is fucked up because they no longer wanted to do that, and they no longer had to set up Michael Keaton and Batgirl. So unfortunately, they came up with a really stupid cameo stinger at the end, which is like one of the many embarrassments.
It's nonsense. It's nonsense.
So you're right that in its final form, this is a problem, but I'm at least going to say their original intentions were better, right? It was supposed to set up Keaton moving forward.
And that's fair, but I can only judge the movie I saw.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
I can only judge the movie I saw. And even with that ending cameo, too, they did actually film something with Cavill, hey? And Diana, or not Diana, but Gal Gadot as a Wonder Woman. And then that was tossed out. And then, like you said, the Keaton stuff's tossed out. And then, yeah, they end with motherfucking George Clooney?
Mm-hmm.
Guys, what? I saw people clap at this.
Yeah.
I saw footage of audiences freaking out, losing their minds. Like this, like what is this revisionist history going on? Like, no, it's just a dumb play. And again, it's just cameo time, right?
Well, you know what it is? We talked about how much it annoys us how Ryan Reynolds won't shut up about Green Lantern. That's my problem with the George Clooney cameo at the end. Is what that is we know it's not like they're not setting up George Clooney to be Batman moving forward because we know he would never do that.
Never.
We know it's a joke where he's doing this just because he thinks it's funny to come in because he can't stop talking about how much he hates Batman and Robin and how it's like the low point of his career and he thinks he ruined the Batman franchise, which by the way, George, don't worry. It was fine, after you. But yeah, that's what it's just supposed to be like, oh, I can't believe he came back because we know he hates that movie. So like, I don't want to end on a joke that reminds me about how this actor didn't like playing this part,
But
And by the way, and also George, like they're like, George, can you come back and do this 5-second cameo? We'll give you $400 million or whatever, probably. And he's like, I don't need to shave my beard, do I? I guess not. No, like he doesn't even look like Bruce Wayne,
But again, it goes back to what I said about fans and general audiences. Okay, there's too many if you know jokes in this, or too many if you know references. You said you like the Eric Stoltz thing, and I know that's quote unquote common knowledge in the film community, but I know my parents don't know that. Right?
Yeah.
And I feel like this movie's way too in the know. So like the George Clooney gag is there because that George Clooney talks shit about that movie. But general audiences don't know anything. They're like, he was Batman once back in the 90s for one movie that everybody hated it. And then like
you know what else general audiences might not know about? That Nicolas Cage almost played Superman, which is maybe a good segue.
Exactly where I was going with this. This fucking cameo fest goes off the rails. Okay? Oh my God. So the worlds are colliding. The realities are colliding.
Okay, before you, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but let me just say, here's exactly what I'm talking about, right? So here's what I mean about how this movie does not take advantage of the multiverse. So you eventually get to a point where you reveal. So just to finally get to the final spoiler here.
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
The actual villain of this movie turns out to be Barry 2, like a version of Barry 2 that can't get so obsessed with going back in time to try and stop this, like to stop Supergirl and Batman being murdered. That he just keeps doing it over and over and over. Mm-hmm. And every time he does, like it still doesn't work. And we learned that he's been doing it now for like thousands of years, right? For thousands of years, he's been trying to fix this timeline thing, and it's just not working. But over time, he's been becoming more mutated. He's gotten old. He's like, the Speed Force has been changing him. Any kind of weapon that gets shoved into him just stays in him and becomes like an outgrowth of his body. So it becomes this like monster version of the Flash, right? Now, if you were coming to me and saying, we want to have a fun multiverse sequence, and I'm the filmmaker, right? And I'm like, my first reaction is, oh, of course you do, right? But here's what I would say. I would go, okay, well then, let's then have the good Flash and the evil Flash fight through the multiverse, right? Mm-hmm. Like, let's have them kind of fight, and suddenly they're fighting in like an old Superman movie, and suddenly they're fighting in the Burton universe, and suddenly they're fighting on like the CW universe. Instead, they just we just see them and like a window view. It's like the laziest multiverse usage I've ever seen in my life. And that's beyond how bad it looks and how ghoulish it is, which I know is what you're going to get to here. So,
oh yes.
Yeah.
All these universes start to collide, and we just see CGI versions of all these characters that we know of from years past. Mm-hmm. So we see Adam West Batman. We hear Cesar Romero. Isn't Cesar Romano? What's that Chris Kattan movie? Cesar Romano?
Corky Romano.
Corky Romano.
Oh man, if Corky Romano had shown up, is that a WB movie? He should have been there.
So we hear.
What if like suddenly like you see like Adam West's Batman, and then suddenly you just hear, "You guys want some cookies?" and it's Corky Romano dressed up as the Girl Scout.
Easy 5 stars, right?
Yes.
So you hear all these sound effects and these voices, and it shows Christopher Reeve and Helen Slater, Supergirl, and they look horrible, nightmarish, fucking CGI
we
creations.
Finally get to see Christopher Reeve and Helen Slater together. The thing we never got before because Christopher Reeve wouldn't do the cameo in Supergirl, and it's like, we finally get to see it, and it's. And then you're like, I never wanted to see that.
No,
take it away.
Trev, not like this.
Yeah, not like
this. And then suddenly you see it cuts to this other universe, and there's this giant spider and Superman from behind with long hair. And listeners, if you don't know this story, it's very famous. You can Google it. Kevin Smith, Superman Lives, Tim Burton story. Okay, he tells you like an hour story about what this is. But basically, he was writing the Superman movie for Tim Burton to direct, and Nick Cage was doing in the starring role. And one of the producers famously wanted him to fight a giant spider, and it was a huge point of contention. Anyways. We see Nicolas Cage. Well, we see PS3 cinematic Nicolas Cage fighting a giant spider, and again, looks so bad. So much so that recently, in the last week, I think I sent you this article, Nick Cage came out saying, oh yeah, I didn't film that.
Yeah.
And like apparently I don't know if he's spoken to Tim Burton, but Tim Burton did kind of say in passing that he's just like, ugh, Christ, shitting on that for me and shitting on my Michael Keaton Batman too. It's like, oh my God. But it's just Cameo Fest. That's all this is. But you know what cameo there wasn't, Trev? Which you'd think would be the biggest shoo-in and easy get is motherfucking Grant Gustin.
I know.
Shocking.
And not shocking, borderline offensive. Ezra Miller showed up on the CW Flash show. Did you know that?
I did know that. Yes, I did.
Yeah. Grant Gustin is actually the guy who, it's canon that Ezra Miller is not called the Flash until he runs into runs into Grant Gustin's universe, and Grant Gustin says, "You're the Flash too," and Ezra Miller goes, "The Flash, I like that." So the Grant Gustin Barry is the one who names him. And so when that happened, I thought, for sure, okay, they're doing a little favor for each other. And I'm sure this was not Ezra Miller's decision. I don't know whose decision. I know Andy Muschietti has said that was a cameo that was planned, and it's just one of the ones they dropped. But why do you drop that?
Amazing.
Why do you drop the other iconic version of his character that's been on TV for, 8 years at this point, like just so baffling. And like it shows the what's the phrase I'm looking for, like not the depth, but like the opposite of depth of the DC roster, and like how like just kind of short-sighted and how their lack of imagination, that when we get to like their multiverse, it's just all Superman and Batman. There's another version of Superman. There's another version of Batman. There's another version of Superman. And it's like, well, where's the rest of the DC characters? Like, and I know, granted, like, you know, like, why not throw in Shaquille O'Neal as Steel? You can't, like, this is where Ryan Reynolds draws the line. You don't think he would have come in and done a little Green Lantern thing there? Like, why not have all those things in there? Why not throw Jonah Hex in if you really want to, like, just be wacky with it? Like, if you're going to do this, you shouldn't. But if you're going to, go crazy at least, you know?
But Trev, this is where it shows. I'll speak for myself, but it's you as well, of course. But so I will speak for both of us. But I think this is where we feel very much removed from this type of fandom. Okay, we've talked about this a lot in the last couple of years, but you have no idea how many audience recordings I saw of people screaming and clapping and crying about all this shit. And then I listened to a certain podcast, I'm not going to name, but it's a very big podcast. And they were talking about their Flash up, like they were doing their Flash review, of course. And the fucking guy was saying he was crying. Okay? As a grown man in his like late 40s, crying and hooting and hollering to the sight of these fucking disgusting creatures on screen. Like, what is happening? Am I really that far removed, Trev? Like, really, or am I so cynical? Do I just see the worst in everything, Trev? What am I doing that's wrong? Why does this not play to me? You know?
Well, you didn't, unlike that podcast host, it wasn't your live stream to see Christopher Reeve's corpse dragged out and you know, with no permission from him, because you can't give permission if you're dead, just come back as Superman. A character that he had a very like contentious relationship with, by the way, you know, So, and same with George Reeve, you know, he shows up in there too. A character, George Reeve committed suicide because of how typecast he was as Superman. So let's throw him in there too, you know, like just unbelievable. Yeah.
It just goes back to, you know, I say it a lot, but it's one of my favorite lines from Jurassic Park is everybody's so preoccupied with if they could, they never stop to think if they should.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel when I see this kind of shit.
Well, I'll take it even further because, like I said, like to me, it's like the extra step of like they're so preoccupied with whether they could, they don't stop to think about they should, and now that they decide they should, they don't decide if they should do it the right way. You
totally.
know,
Yeah.
Like if you're gonna do it, at least do it to where, like I said, have them actually engage with the multiverse, have them interact with these environments and these characters instead of just being like, like I said, this is about as lazy as it gets to just go like, oh, there's the Christopher Reeve universe and they're looking at us. Oh, there's Adam West dancing. Oh, there's George Reeves standing on a rooftop. And it's like, okay, that's it? Like, they're not going to do anything? Like, why do I care? You said these people are crying and hooting and hollering in the theater. Why? I can watch, like, clip packages on YouTube, you know? That's all this is.
When I said this movie's okay until it's shit, this is, like, the moment where I'm like, man, it just becomes more, or I guess less, it becomes less redeemable in my eyes, you know? Because, again, this is the product that we got. This is the Flash movie, the movie that started its development in the early 2000s, and this is what we get, and this is the one that's gonna, you know, I don't know if it stand the test of time, but when are we gonna get another Flash movie?
Hold on, I'm checking my notes. I have a note here that says "Note is not standing the test of time."
Yeah.
That's, and just a few months afterwards, I know that's.
Yeah, exactly. But where do we go from here, Trev? You know, we've looked at the DCPU, you know, we like to call it. We've done 40 years of this, and now we're in a new leadership with James Gunn and Peter Safran, right? So, are they going to get it right? I'm not sure. I really don't know. Like, especially when James Gunn's coming out and pimping this movie, I don't trust that guy, and I like him. But I don't trust him.
Yeah, like you, like I love James Gunn as a filmmaker too. I do think, like, even when this came out, I wondered like how much of like his signing the deal, you know, to take over DC was like, you also have to like talk about how great the Flash is, you know. But you're right in that he is just a company man. He also went through like one of the worst like ramroddings by a company ever, and then came back. So maybe now he's like very careful, you know, about being a company man and what he says. I think you can connect those dots.
Yeah.
My fear is that Gunn and Safran are going to get it right for the most part, because I think Gunn is the right guy to be, to headline something like this. My fear is that they're going to get it right at a time where who cares? You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah.
Like they're going to get it right, and we're going to be like, yeah, that's great, but we're just over it. Like that's how I feel. Like, am I excited to see James Gunn's Superman movie? Yeah, I am. Not as excited as I would have been 5 years ago. Definitely not as excited as I would have been 10 years ago. It's really sad that like I'm kind of interested in a James Gunn Superman movie. That should be like a home run for me. And like instead I'm like, yeah, I think it'll be good, but like by the time it hits, I'll be even more fed up with superhero stuff than I am now. You know? So that's the problem. Is it's a very strange time as like it's becoming more of a public discussion about how the DC or about the MCU is starting to falter. That then they're like, how do you think Gunn feels right now when everyone's writing stories about how like the MCU is failing and superheroes are finally done, and he's like, oh, anyways, here's my 5-year plan for the new DCU. It's like it doesn't even matter if they get it right anymore. We're just over it.
You know what? You're right. People argued with us, and just argued people in general, that there was no such thing as superhero fatigue, right? Mm-hmm. And for over a year, people have been saying, no, it's just bad product. It's just bad product. No, I think people are done. They need a break. Mm-hmm. I personally was feeling that after Endgame. And Endgame, to me, I was like, oh, fuck. I was the one hooting and hollering at that movie. You know what I mean? Like, I loved that movie. But then I was like, you know what? If the MCU took a 5-year break, I would be happy. Yeah. And of course, in a corporate world we live in, that would never, ever happen. But I always felt that the next movie, like 3 months later, that fucking Spider-Man 2 movie came out, and it was like, it felt disrespectful. It felt like disrespectful for what my journey with the MCU went through to just get another one. You know what I mean? And even in that movie, it was a little disrespectful to the heroes that either sacrificed themselves or whatnot. It was just one big joke. This like 15-year journey we went on with the Infinity Saga, and then it just became a punchline. And then, well, we've seen where the MCU has gone in the last couple of years. So I don't want to say that me and you were ahead of the curve, but I think we saw the tea leaves before, Variety did,
But at least the long journey of the DCEU, which began with Man of Steel, ends with Aquaman sleeping in a puddle. No, wait, I'm sorry. I forgot that Aquaman 2 is still coming. Which, again, like I said, I'll see. I liked Aquaman. I like James Wan. I'm hoping it's good. And that's it. Like, to be fair, and I'm sure you will feel this way too, this is not to say we're not calling our shot and saying we're never going to like another superhero movie.
No, of course not.
We'll like the good ones, But it is true that, like, I don't think we're ready to cut the middling ones any more, like, of a break. And be like, that was fine, which I think we did for a long time. There's a lot of, like, if I look at my MCU ranking, there's a lot of movies in the middle that are like kind of average movies that I was just so into the idea of the MCU at the time that I'm like, yeah, I like this. And now it's more like, another one of those, huh? That's where I'm at now, where you have to be really, really good and really special to kind of break through. And that's just not happening that often anymore.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. More. It's funny you just mentioned the Aquaman cameo. That's the post-credit scene of The Flash, by the way, is Aquaman is drunk with Barry, even though we reset the timeline or something's going on and we still don't know what's happening, but he falls drunk into a puddle, and that's how this movie ends. Mm-hmm. And again, why? Why is that there?
I don't know. Yeah, that's the thing. Is like, it's not funny enough to justify being there. So, yeah, I don't know. It's like you don't like. Did they need Aquaman in it that bad? Then why not have him do like a pointless cameo like Wonder Woman did earlier?
And why make him look like a buffoon?
Well, Aquaman is kind of a buffoon in this universe, so that's whatever.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what I have to say about The Flash.
Yeah, it's like weird because like I still don't know. Like, I'm not telling. This is one where I'm not going to tell people not to watch it because I think it's decent enough at times to be, and it's not that long. I guess it's 2.5 hours. They all are now, but
yeah.
it actually. This is not a Flash joke, but I do think it moves fast, and I do think it's better than something like Black Adam. Here's what I'll say about it: it's a bad movie that I think has its heart in a better place than something like Black Adam. Do you agree with that? Like, I don't think it's as.
It's not as ego driven. That's for sure.
Not as ego driven. It's not as bland. No. It's not as boring. It's not a boring movie. And even sometimes when it gets really bad, it's like interestingly bad. Where you're like, oh my god.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Like it's worth it to check out like even. Well, I mean, I was gonna say a supercut of the action, but it's like 99% CGI, right? But it's worth it to witness. to witness it in action.
This movie truly does hover in that weird spot for me, to where if someone tells me they hate it, I would be like, I get it, and I will not argue with you. And if someone tells me I really liked it, I'll be like, I kind of get it, and I won't argue with you, because I just fall kind of right there in the middle on this one.
Sure.
So I don't even know if I guess I still don't know if I'm leaning more negative, more positive. I'm just confused by this movie. That's my final say about it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, Trev, you want to have a little bit of fun? Final?
Yeah, it's finally like
Okay.
we owe it to ourselves after all this.
I think so too. Yeah. Out of the DCPU, again, if this is your first episode, please go back, listen to the last few. We really ran the gamut.
Ooh, do you want to quickly, like, before we get into what we're about to do next?
Sure.
Maybe I didn't preface this, so you probably didn't think about it. But in terms of ranking the DCPU, can you at least say what's a favorite and what would be your favorite and what would be your worst?
My favorite is easily Superman Returns. I mean,
me too.
That movie's great. I think that movie's great.
I agree.
My least favorite, though, I'm not going to rank them, but my least favorite, that's hard. Because, like, I didn't really like Supergirl or Steel, but there was, like, charm to them, right? Like, I both liked the leads. I think the leads made those movies watchable, and Shaquille O'Neal is bad in that movie, but he just means so well. Like, he's trying so hard, And Helen Slater's adorable, and she's great, and she's super good in them. She's super good as Supergirl when she's given something to do. Does have that weird rape scene, though, so...
Attempted.
I don't know if I like that. It's hard to pick the lesser one because, I objectively gave lower star ratings to Supergirl and Steel, but then, like, Green Lantern and Black Adam are just kind of blah movies, So I'd probably rewatch Supergirl and Steel before I rewatch Black Adam and Green Lantern, So I don't know. I don't know if I'll pick a lesser, but my favorite is Superman Returns, and sorry that I did a long-winded Trev answer.
So I'll keep mine brief. Superman Returns is my favorite, and least favorite for me is Green Lantern. Like, Black Adam was bad, but like you said, any moment he murders someone, doesn't care. I at least get some amusement out of that. Green Lantern, as we discussed, because of what that character meant to me and everything, I found almost nothing redeeming about that movie.
Sure, yep. That's fair. Okay, moving on from the DCPU. Longtime listeners know that we do this every single year. Trev, the holiday season is upon us. And what we like to do is celebrate Trev and Christmas. This is our third annual doing it this time. This is a event where we gift each other a film that the other one does not know what was chosen. So, Trev, who wants to go first?
You know what? I'll go first, if you don't mind.
As in, give me one?
Yeah, I'll give you my gift first.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good.
Since I was kind enough to let you talk about The Flash first.
Okay, I like that. Yeah, sure. Okay, cool.
So, Chris, I already sent you the package. It's sitting over there if you want
to. Okay, all right. Okay, I'm looking at it here.
So, Chris, I wanted, after we survived all these, like, really rough movies, I wanted to give you something that I thought I knew we could have a little bit more fun with, something a little bit more lighthearted, but I also wanted to get into the holidays, like, joy and like the holiday feeling. Not a holiday movie necessarily, but from a filmmaker who is very kind of associated with Christmas movies, and with two actors I know both of us are fans of. So that's why I thought it might be fun for us to take a look at 2016's The Nice Guys.
Excellent choice. Yes. Excellent choice. Oh, you made my day.
Yes.
Oh,
got
great.
Gosling, got Crow. Come on, baby. Shane
Awesome.
Black. Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, wow. I'm excited. Okay, great. I haven't seen that since theaters.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Excellent. Awesome. I'm looking forward to that. That'll be a great discussion. Okay. How about you? Okay. You got my gift there?
Yeah. Got it right here. Let me start tearing into this.
Okay.
Oh. Okay. All right.
So I did choose in a similar vein. Okay. Not necessarily a Christmas movie, but a director associated with a Christmas film. And because in our Black Adam episode, you texted me afterwards saying, we didn't really talk much about Pierce Brosnan, and I agreed with that. So you know what? We're looking at 1999's John McTiernan's film, The Thomas Crown Affair.
Oh, buddy. So, I haven't seen that movie in so long, and I'm so excited to revisit that movie. Yeah.
Cool, yeah. I thought that'd be a good one for us, for sure.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
That's great. Cool. I love that we picked like a similar avenue,
Yeah.
That's great. That's cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, listeners, keep on with us at F2FPod. That's at F2, the number 2 FPod on all the socials. Like us there, like us everywhere. Rate, review, whatever you do. Give us a star rating, that'd be great. And just join the tribe and hit that subscribe. And celebrate Trev and Christmas with us.
Mm-hmm. And you can't see it, but the final stinger for our podcast is both of our front teeth just fell out.
What a hilarious joke.
Yeah, I know. What a great way to end the DCEU.
Fucking teeth falling out of their goddamn mouths.
You should seek the services of a mental health professional. The Justice League is not very good at that part yet. Trust me.